So my name is Eric. This is my shop. I do mostly, the shop's name is Banks Maintenance and Fabrication. I do mostly automotive repairs. I do some metal work and fabrication. As you can see, I'm going to do some videos on these two trucks. I have a friend's Mustang over there that I'm working on. I have some metal cut up over here to start working on a CNC plasma table. I have another buddy's 5.3 over here that is gonna go eventually, gonna go in a 2000 Camaro with a, I think he's gonna run a single turbo, but possibly twins. You can see the garage is a mess. That's what happens when you start 30 projects and don't manage to finish any of them. But I figured I'd start recording some of what I do and see if anybody wants to come along and watch what I have going on. We're over here on the workbench. There's a couple of different ways that you can pack these bearings. I have a bearing packer just because it's less messy. I'm going to use some red and tacky number 2. That's probably not the best grease to be using for wheel bearings, but that's what I got, so that's what we're using. The other way that you would use it, the old school way, is you would take a pile of grease out of your tub or your tube and put it in the palm of your hand, and then you take your bearing in your other hand, and you have this opening here at the bottom between the inner race and the cage, and you basically work the grease while you're moving the bearing along the pile, and you just keep going around and around, grabbing more grease and forcing more grease up between that inner race and the roller and the cage until it starts coming out the top. And then you spin the bearing a little bit and keep going until you're all the way around the bearing, and you've worked it enough that grease is now coming out the top side of the cage. With the with this style, it's not much different. You put the bearing in there, you put a little bit of pressure on it, and you push down until you get grease coming out the opposite side of the cage all the way around. And you can kind of see how there's grease coming out both sides of the cage all the way around. It was forced up from the bottom and out the top side of the cage. And then now what I'll do is I'll take some of the grease that's sitting in there and I'll wipe some around the outside of the cage. And then that bearing's ready to go. I'll probably put a little more grease inside the rotor once the rotor's installed. The little bearings tend to be a little bit easier. The bigger bearings take more grease, so you'll wind up with more grease on the top side. And it takes a fair bit of pressure to make that happen. But as you can see, grease from one side all the way up through the other side. And then I'll take the remainder of what's in here and kind of wipe it around the outside of the rollers. I'm going to drop that back in there for a second. I'm going to lose my gloves. We're going to take some brake clean. Supposed to use soap and water is the best thing to use. Most guys just wind up using brake clean though. And we're going to get a rag and we're just going to wipe off the little bit of anti-corrosion stuff that's put on the rotor at the factory. And I'm going to wipe down this race, then we'll put the inside bearing into the race and we'll install our seal. All right, so I wiped down the back side of it. I'm going to take my bearing, drop it down in the race. Make sure it's sitting there nice and plumb. I'm going to clean up a little bit of this excess grease. Just where the seal goes in. I got my seal here. Let me go find a hammer and a seal driver and I'll be right back. So what I have for a seal driver set is just this Harbor Freight icon set. It doesn't fit everything, but none of them do. I'm not sure what the part number 58262 it looks like the part number is. I believe it's going to be this guy that's going to be pretty close. Oh, maybe one size up from him. Yeah, that one looks like it's almost a perfect fit for the outside diameter of that seal. You can see the seal's got a lip on the inside. This part of the seal is going to go in towards the bearing. So the seal is going to sit in there like that. Then you install the driver on the handle. It's got a end you can whack it with a hammer. So I got it installed on the handle portion. I got my hammer here. We're just going to give it a whack and drive the seal in. Just a hair more on this side. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to flip it over, probably off camera. I'm going to wipe down the other side of the rotor, carry it back over to the truck, and we'll slide it on the truck. So the spindle's not in the greatest shape, but it's what we got to work with. So I cleaned it up with a little bit of brake clean and a rag. Got my rotor here with the inner bearing and the seal on it already. The outer bearing sitting there on the towel. I got my washer and my nut. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the rotor on and wiggle it till it seats all the way back where it's supposed to be. There we go. I'm going to take the outer bearing and slide it in. Sometimes you gotta work it a little bit to get it to slide in. There we go. All right, it's in. I got my washer. You can make fun of how I say that later. It only fits one direction. And then my nut. So when I took this apart, it had this castle nut on it, which it should, that's how they come. But it did not have a cotter pin in it. And I always use new cotter pins, or try to, if I have something on hand that fits, when I take stuff apart, because a cotter pin by design is, it hardens, it fatigues when you work it. So I just have a couple of these packs that float around with various sizes, and they usually fit most stuff. So I try to never reuse cotter pins. So I'm going to run the nut down until it gets snug. And then I'm going to start spinning the bearing and tighten it little by little. Because I want to make sure that these bearings are seated. Now I'm sure there's some torque spec on how to do this somewhere. Some of the medium and heavy duty vehicles, there's aftermarket manufacturers that make nuts, and they want you to have a specific torque procedure where you torque it down to 200 foot-pounds while you're spinning it, and then you back it off a turn and a half or 2 turns, and then you torque it back down to 100 foot-pounds, and then you'd back it off to where your pin lines up or whatever securement they have. But we don't need to get that fancy. Not with this truck anyway. We're just gonna snug them up and make sure everything's seated. And then you basically want to give it a spin, and you want it to go about 1 full rotation. If you leave them too tight, there's too much friction, and you're going to create too much heat. That's kind of the whole point. A little bit more off of it. I think I'm going to go right about there. Give it a wiggle back and forth. Yeah, there's no real play in it, but if I grab this stud, actually let me find a marker, I'll mark it. And this is kind of the old school way to do it. Let me mark it there, it's easier to see. And if I grab it and I give it a spin, where we wind up at. So we still wound up down here about the bottom. So yeah, that got us all the way around. Yep. So I'm gonna call that pretty good right there. Find my cotter pin, put my cotter pin in. That guy might be a little small. Let's see. This guy's long enough to go all the way through. Yeah, a little longer than that. Try that guy. All right, that guy's gonna do. I'll usually bend one tab all the way back over the face of the bolt, then kind of push the other one down just a little bit. That pin actually worked out pretty good because we don't need to trim anything off. Can wipe that up just a little bit. I have the cover right here. And we'll just give it a few little taps till it seats. All right. And this side, Rotor installation is done. As you can see, the caliper's hanging. Right now it's hanging by the hose. Normally I'm of the school that you wouldn't do that. You'd tie it up somehow. But knowing that I'm going to replace these brake hoses, I wasn't too concerned about it. There was a nut and a bracket that holds it up here. I've already taken that loose. I went in from the top and broke the line loose. It came right off. It didn't give me any problems. Sometimes you got to heat them up or hit them with penetrating oil, whatever you can do to keep that metal line from twisting as you try to unthread the fitting. But this one didn't give me any problems at all, so I cracked it loose and then I snugged it back up while I was waiting for the parts to come in. So there's a little pin up, or pin, I guess you'd call it a clip, up here that holds the brake line into the bracket. So I'm going to unscrew the brake line out of the hose. I'll unclip the bracket and just take the caliper and the hose out as one piece. And when I install the new one, I'm going to take the caliper, install the hose onto the caliper, and then fit it up in here. And I'll probably just set it up back here behind the rotor somewhere on the control arm. Set it up in there, put the clip in, rethread that, install the pads, and then move on to the other side. So this truck has this little, I don't know what it's made out of, fiber. It's not really plastic. It's not really rubber either. Part of the inner fender liner. And you can see it's tore back here. I just did that by hand, kind of pulling it, trying to get it up out of the control arm here. So I have this cheap little tool that came with a set of these plastic pins on Amazon, and it's probably the best thing that I've had so far to remove some of these little plastic pins. And it works great on almost all the different styles. If I can get it to work in behind this one. Let's see, switch hands here. Let's try a different one here. If you get it to work in behind it and you got something to apply leverage against, they usually pop right out. But I'm probably going to pull this piece off just so it gives me more room. And I'm probably just going to leave it off. I'm not going to bother trying to find a replacement. I mean, it does serve a purpose. It's to keep the tire and road debris from getting kicked up into the engine compartment here. But on this old truck, it's probably not available in the aftermarket, and it's not worth spending a whole lot of time and money trying to chase one down. So I'm going to get that out of there, and then that'll give me a little more access to that brake hose and brake line fitting right there. So you can see now that's opened up a whole lot more. We have what I believe are either oil cooler lines or the power steering lines right here going to the Hydro Boost. This right here isn't in the best spot sitting here. I think that's for a block heater that really needs to be secured up there better and probably wrapped up a little bit. But you can see our brake hose and brake line sitting right here now. Because I already broke it loose, I could get in here with my little stubby right here and disconnect it right there. I have this little set of vacuum caps that I ordered off of Amazon, and they come in handy, so I'll get that brake line disconnected from the hose here, probably pop this little bracket loose that's holding the line so I can move it enough. I'll slide one of them vacuum caps on there just to keep it from dribbling brake fluid all over the place. So I got the line disconnected up here. The little plastic clip just disintegrated as soon as I tried to loosen it. So I got some, they call them P clamps because it's shaped like a P and it's got a little rubber liner. And when I go and reinstall this, I'm going to throw a P clamp on there to hold that brake line in place. It also looks like it's rubbing behind this control arm mount back here. So after it's installed here and that P-clamp's in place, I'm going to tweak the line just a little bit to keep it from rubbing back there. I'm not sure if these lines were replaced at some point. I mean, they look like they're in pretty good shape and they came loose pretty easy, but there's really no rust on this truck whatsoever. I'm pretty sure that it was an Air Force truck. I'm not sure what they used it for, but it was 60,000 original miles. They didn't do a whole lot with it, so it sat most of its life probably in a motor pool or on a flight line somewhere. So I think most of this is going to come apart pretty easy. So we got the old caliper and hose off the truck and on the bench. Pulled the new caliper out of the box. Compared the two calipers, they are the same. We have the new brake hose. As you can see, the bracket's very similar. The orientation of the hose is correct. The length of the hose is correct. We got a couple of sets of copper washers. One came with the caliper, one came with the hose. We only need one set of them. Got our banjo bolt, brand new banjo bolt that came with the caliper. This is a reman caliper. We'll take one of our copper washers on one side of our bolt, make sure that our hose is going to wind up in the correct orientation and the bracket is also. One washer on the top, one washer on the bottom. Let me go find the correct size socket for that. So I got my socket. I went ahead and sat it up in the vise just so I have a third hand. I'm going to snug it down. And then I'm just going to give it a slight little tap. And that should be good for that. We'll, even though this is a reman caliper, I'm still going to take the slide pins out and lube them all up. As you can see, they have a coating on them. They have some grease on them, but it's not near enough for what I like to see. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more on there. I'll grab the pads. We'll throw the pads on, throw the caliper back on, and then we'll hook the hose back up. Well, these calipers have sleeves and bolts, and then they have seals on both ends. I'm going to go ahead and lube both of them up. I like to use actual caliper grease. Some people like to use anti-seize. I use the caliper grease for the slides. I use caliper grease on the pads, anywhere that the pads slide. I worked in one shop where the owner wanted you to use the yellow weather strip adhesive on the back of the pads. And I mean, I guess everybody's got their opinions. You never really had a comeback for noise, but that also just kind of glued the pads in place when the pads are supposed to be able to kind of float around a little bit. So as you can see, there's some grease on the contact points where the pads contact calipers. I greased the sleeves and the bolts for the slides. We're ready to go back on the truck. So we're set up back at the truck. I am going to feed my brake line through, make sure that I'm not getting any kind of dirt or anything in there. Going to slide the caliper back over the rotor, get it back in place, maybe. There we go. Let me get the bolt started so the caliper can't go anywhere. Top one is started. Give it a little wiggle to get the bottom one started. That one is started. Let me find my bolt for my bracket. That's not it. All right, let me find my bolt for my bracket and I'll be right back. All right, so we're all back together on this side. I was looking for the bracket bolt thinking it was a threaded bolt, and it ended up being a nut and bolt. I guess that's what happens when there's weeks that go by between taking stuff apart and putting it together. I tightened down the caliper bolts. The hose is reinstalled, the fitting is tight. I don't know how well you can see the little insulated P-clamp that I installed up there where the plastic one broke. I forget what the package called them. I'll have to look. They didn't call them a P-clamp, but I call them a P-clamp because that's bus garage that I worked at. That's what we used, and what we called them was P-clamps. But they work great when you need to insulate something, keep it from rubbing. I'm gonna break down the other side and get it finished up. And then I'm gonna crack the bleeders loose on both sides, let it gravity bleed. Probably flush a good bit of the old brake fluid out of this till I get some fresh stuff down at the new calipers. And then I'll either get the Mighty Vac out and try to bleed them myself, or I'll find somebody to come help me bleed them. All right, thanks for watching.